Today's podcast is going to talk about three big topics. The first topic are neurotransmitters. Some neurons house more than one type of neurotransmitter. This would mean that more than one type of neurotransmitter would be present in the synapse at any time. There are 7 common neurotransmitters that you need to know. They stand for snagged. The first letter of all of them, when you put them in order, spells the word snagged because they're snagged by the receiving neuron at the synapse. The S stands for serotonin, which handles your mood and emotional stability. N, norepinephrine, arousal and energy. A is for acetylcholine. Sometimes you'll see that just written as ACH. That handles movement and memory. First G is for glutamate, also in charge of memory and learning. The second G, GABA. This is for relaxation and sleep. In this list of 7, this is the only inhibitory neurotransmitter that you need to know. E stands for endorphins, so pain relief and positive emotions. And the D stands for dopamine, or rewarding sensations. The second topic we're going to talk about are psychoactive drugs and the brain. So psychoactive drugs are chemicals that alter or change someone's perception or mood. They can lead to substance use disorders. There's 3 big types: depressants, stimulants, and hallucinogens. Depressants reduce neural activity and slow body functions. Some examples would be alcohol, barbiturates or tranquilizers, opiates, so heroin, codeine, morphine, and methadone. And an FYI about opiates: when the brain is repeatedly flooded with an artificial opiate, such as prescription painkillers, the brain eventually stops producing its own endorphins. So when the artificial opiate is removed, people can actually go through extreme withdrawal. Stimulants, these excite neural activity and they speed up body functions. So some examples of them would be caffeine, nicotine, cocaine, methamphetamine, or ecstasy. Hallucinogens are psychedelic drugs that distort perceptions and create sensory images in the absence of sensory input. Examples of this would be LSD, ecstasy, which is also a stimulant, and marijuana. Drugs affect the neuron and synapse. One of the mechanisms that's frequently targeted by drugs is reuptake. This is when a neurotransmitter reabsorbs or is reabsorbed by the sending neuron in the synapse. So it's kind of like recycling for neurotransmitters. If they're left in the synapse, the neuron that sent them will take them right back. Some antidepressant medications work by partially blocking the reuptake of mood-enhancing neurotransmitters like serotonin. So this would cause those neurotransmitters to hang out in the synapse a little longer, and it would increase their chance of being received by the next neuron. An important note: neurotransmitters are produced inside of the body. They can be excited, but they also can inhibit neural communication. Drugs and other chemicals come from outside the body. They can have an agonistic effect or an antagonistic effect on neurotransmission. So agonists increase a neurotransmitter's actions, whether it is excitatory or inhibitory. Some may increase the production of a neurotransmitter. Some may block reuptake of a neurotransmitter. Some are similar enough in structure to a specific neurotransmitter that they can bind to the receptor site and mimic the excitatory or inhibitory effects. And some opiate drugs are agonists and produce a temporary high by amplifying normal sensations of arousal or pleasure. Antagonists decrease a neurotransmitter's actions, whether they are excitatory or inhibitory. Some might block the production of a neurotransmitter. Some might block the release of a neurotransmitter. Some are similar enough in structure to a specific neurotransmitter. They can actually bind to the receptor site, but they don't mimic the effects. Instead, they jam the receptor so the correct neurotransmitter cannot bind. This would be like putting the wrong coin into an arcade game, and it jams the place you'd put a token. One thing to keep in mind with neurotransmitters is that it's like a lock and key. So the neurotransmitter fits with a very specific receptor site. If it's not the correct receptor site, it will not bind. The final topic is on the structure of the brain. So there are some major brain regions we need to cover. We're going to go oldest to newest in terms of evolution. So the older brain structures, they handle things that occur without any conscious effort. So the first part is the brainstem. This is the oldest part and central core of the brain. Starts at the top of the spinal cord, and the base of the brainstem is called the medulla, and that's responsible for automatic survival functions like heartbeat and breathing. On top of the medulla is the pons. That's responsible for coordinating movements and controlling sleep. Next is the thalamus. This is the sensory control center of the brain. It directs messages to the sensory receiving areas in the cortex and sends replies to the cerebellum and medulla. The reticular formation filters incoming sensory information to other brain areas. It actually helps with multitasking, and research shows that it controls our arousal. The cerebellum, you'll notice, is kind of at the backside of the brainstem and the thalamus. This enables nonverbal learning and skill memory, helps us judge time, regulate our emotions, and discriminate between different sounds or textures. The limbic system is a little newer than some of those older brain structures in terms of evolution. The first part of it is the amygdala. This is linked to aggression, fear, and primal emotions. The hypothalamus influences hunger, regulates thirst, body temperature, and sexual behavior. It also helps the body to maintain a homeostatic or steady state. The hippocampus processes conscious, explicit memories and actually decreases in size and function as we get older. The newest part of our brain in terms of evolution is called the cerebral cortex. This is the body's ultimate control and information processing center. And it's divided into 4 lobes, which you can see in the picture in the bottom right of your screen. The frontal lobe is located just behind your forehead. It's involved in speaking and muscle movements, as well as making plans and judgments. The parietal lobe is at the top of the head. It receives sensory input for touch and body position. The temporal lobe is just above the ears. It's responsible for processing auditory information. And the occipital lobe is at the back of the head. It's responsible for processing visual information. There's also some cortical areas we should be aware of. The motor cortex controls voluntary movements. We find that at the back of the frontal lobes. The somatosensory cortex registers and processes body touch and movement sensations. This is at the front of the parietal lobes, and you can see these two in the top right corner of your screen. The prefrontal cortex allows judgment, planning, and processing of new memories. This is in the front of the frontal lobes. Language in the brain. There are 2 areas that are primarily responsible for processing language in the brain: Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Broca's area, if it was damaged in a stroke, someone would be able to comprehend speech, but they would struggle to produce speech on their own. Some doctors would call their speech broken. Wernicke's area, if it was damaged in a stroke, someone would struggle to understand speech. So their speech would be called nonsensical or word salad. And you can see these 2 areas outlined in like a dashed line on your screen. The 2 halves of the brain work together, but they're not exactly alike. The right hemisphere is great at processing perceptual information, among other things, and the left hemisphere is great at speaking and math calculations, among other things. So if you ever hear someone say that they are right-brained or left-brained, that is actually incorrect. They use both halves of their brain. But they may be more comfortable doing some skills that the right hemisphere is dominant in or the left hemisphere is dominant in. But each side of the brain works on different aspects of a skill. So each side of the brain handles language. Each side of the brain handles some aspect of memory or movement, hearing, or vision.